Alrighty guys, today we're going to be talking about UFOs, one of my favorite subjects. I am going to just go through a few tabs and talk about some videos and some sources that you can go through. We're just going to do some live learning. I'm going to tell you about the people in the videos, a little bit about their background, what I've learned about them. I'm going to try to keep everything pretty surface level. I'm trying to not get in the weeds in this video, trying not to hypothesize about things. I just want to give you some background and info for a good starting point if you're curious about UFOs and you want to learn more. So today, November 13th, 2024, something kind of big happened. There was a congressional hearing where these four panelists were asked questions about UFOs. They were asked questions like, do they outperform our current weapon systems? Do they defy current known laws of physics? Is there evidence of non-human intelligence? Do there exist videos other than the ones that the public has seen? Where are these events taking place? Things like that are the questions that they were asked. So there are 6 important people I want to point out to you in this video. First of all, you got Ryan Graves sitting in the background. He was actually on a panel last year in July where he answered questions for Congress alongside Commander David Fravor and David Grush. The 3 of them have unique experiences and stories where Congress wanted to know about them. Also in the background, you can see Jeremy Corbell here and George Knapp. Both of them are journalists, and Jeremy is a filmmaker. Jeremy is also sitting in the background of this panel that happened today. So I want to start with the panel that happened in July. I just want to give you some info about these guys. So David Fravor, he had an incident in 2004 where he was doing some training exercises in his plane. He's a pilot for the Navy. And there was an incident off the coast of California where he was doing an exercise and he saw a object on his radar. He went to check it out and he saw it like hovering over the water. He kind of got closer to it and it kind of zipped around at insanely high speeds. He was like kind of blown away by it, but he figured it was like some government testing stuff. Then he went back to his carrier and landed his aircraft, reported it. Then another pilot went out and was able to record a video, which is now known as the FLIR video, also known as the Tic Tac video, because the object looked kind of like a Tic Tac, like the mint. So that is David Fravor's background, and he hasn't been that outspoken about it. However, he did go on Joe Rogan and talk about it, but he has very limited knowledge on the subject other than his personal experience. So then we've got Lieutenant Ryan Graves on this left side. He is also a Navy pilot, and he has, since retiring, gotten involved in safety for American pilots, not only in the military but in commercial, and he founded a company for that. His background with UFOs that kind of spurred his concerns were some incidents where him and his squadron were doing exercises over the ocean, and some of these UFO objects would interact with the craft off in the distance, or they would even come close, dangerously close. He accounts that one time there were some planes flying side by side and one of the objects zipped right between the 2 planes and split the aircraft. They described the object as not very big, not big enough to hold a human, and it was like a cube with a like a transparent sphere around it. That experience where it went right down the middle happened to some of his squad mates, but he is an eyewitness, just like Mr. Fravor, to some of these UFO craft over the ocean. Then in the middle, we have Major David Grush. Let me just tell you about his background. After many years of service, he eventually was tasked with collecting stories and accounts of UFO experiences and crash retrievals. So he would go around and interview servicemen, ex-servicemen, and so he spent years collecting, and eventually he decided this is too much to be kept secret. The American people deserve to know about this. He can't get specific with it, but he can say some things like there is evidence of non-human biologics being recovered, and also saying that there are crash retrievals. Mr. Grush doesn't even have his own personal eyewitness accounts. He just has hearsay stories, but he has so many of them that he is convinced that the phenomenon is real. So that's those three guys. These three guys were the first panelists to do a UFO congressional hearing in U.S. history. So that was a major event that happened in July of 2023. Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp helped orchestrate all of this. They have been in contact with these guys for years and have worked to get to this point. So it was a major breakthrough. So fast forward to today, November 13th, 2024, we had our second panel where Congress asked these whistleblower guys questions about UFOs. And a lot of times they have to say, I can't tell you that information, or they have to word it in a way that's protects them and keeps them safe. If you watch this video, you'll hear Mr. Luis Elizondo say a couple times that he can't talk about crash retrievals. So we've got this panel that just happened today, right? You got Ryan Graves sitting in the background. Important figure here. Very focused on safety of pilots and people in the air. Now, about these four panelists. This guy, Dr. Gallaudet, he was involved in the incident with David Fravor, Commander David Fravor here. But he mentions that he was on the carrier and saw the video recording come in via email, the FLIR video that we talked about earlier, looked at it, watched the video, and then went about his business. The next day he comes back and the email has been deleted, and he was like, what the heck? So that's kind of his tie-in to why he's on this panel. Mr. Gold over here, I have never heard of him before today. He was probably asked the least questions out of all four of these guys today, but he was very passionate and giddy almost about the things he wanted to say. He talked a lot about wanting NASA to disclose their data on UFOs. He's like, Congress, you guys need to pass some laws that force NASA and other companies to disclose their data. So that's kind of what he was advocating for. Now, Michael Schellenberger, some of you may know who he is. He's a journalist who has kind of risen to notoriety more recently. He's been on Joe Rogan. I forgot to mention, all three of these guys, and these two guys, George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell, have all five been on Joe Rogan at various times over the years. Luis Elizondo also recently went on Joe Rogan, and so has Michael Schellenberger. So Schellenberger went on Joe Rogan to talk about the Twitter files a while back. That's probably one of his most notable stories that he's done, is the one on the Twitter files. Schellenberger was one of 6 journalists that Elon Musk gave the Twitter files to so that they could review them and write a story and an assessment on those Twitter files. Schellenberger recently was approached by a whistleblower about a program in the U.S. government called Immaculate Constellation. I don't know a ton about this program yet because it was the documents about it were just released today, but the gist of it is that it is a parent program for compartmentalizing the information, and this Immaculate Constellation program was another one where it was collecting UFO data from people, from radio signals, from videos, from other advanced surveillance systems. So this Immaculate Conception program, as far as I know, was not actually doing the retrievals of the craft. It was more a parent program for collecting the data. So Michael Schallenberger was recently approached by a whistleblower about a program called Immaculate Constellation. This person kept their name and their gender and all their private information completely anonymous. They didn't want to be known. They just wanted to let Michael Schallenberger know about it for him to write a story about it. So that's kind of why Michael Schallenberger is on this panel today. Luis Elizondo, right here. He has the most notoriety concerning UFOs out of these four guys. He has been around for a long time in the UFO world. He had some serious experience in the U.S. government and had access to some serious UFO knowledge. His job was to take top secret information and figure out how to make it secret and how to keep it secret. So he was tasked with compartmentalizing so that the right people knew about the program and so that the wrong people had no idea it existed. So he had a lot of things come across his desk. One thing that's also notable about Luis Elizondo is back in 2017, New York Times and the Washington Post did stories on UFOs. This was pretty groundbreaking, almost as groundbreaking as these UFO hearings. In those two stories by the New York Times and the Washington Post, there were 3 videos released. One of them was the FLIR video, which the FLIR video is also known as the Tic Tac video, which was recorded during David Fravor's UFO incident. Now, there are 2 more videos that were released in those stories called the Gimbal video and the Go Fast video. All 3 of these videos are insanely blurry and grainy. I'm not even going to show them to you. The best one is the Gimbal if you're curious. So Luis is the one who released those 3 videos to the New York Times and to the Washington Post. So he played a major role in getting that information out and accessible to the public. So that's what Luis Elizondo did. He recently wrote his book called Imminent, and he recently went on Joe Rogan. You know how they always do when they release a book. Everybody's got to go on Joe Rogan, talk about it. Elizondo did a bunch of interviews recently. If you look him up, the majority of them say kind of the same thing. He talks about his personal experiences where when he was tapped on the shoulder to get involved in this UFO stuff, he started seeing like glowing balls of light in his home where they were like going through the walls and like floating through his house, and his wife and kids all saw them. It happened for a few months. He wasn't intimidated by it, but it eventually stopped, and that's just something that happened to him that I thought you guys might think is interesting. But he talks about that in his personal interviews, not in this UFO hearing though. Okay, let's move on from this. Let's talk about these 2 guys in the background now, Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp. George Knapp, he's been around for a long time, since the 80s. One of his most notable stories that he did was on Bob Lazar. So Bob Lazar claims to have worked at Area 51 as a citizen, and he says that they had him working to back engineer UFO craft. Here he is right here on Joe. He went on there with Jeremy Corbell. There's Jeremy. Jeremy is very excited, and he's very happy that Bob went on this podcast and that UFOs are getting some traction. He's also a filmmaker. He's good buddies with this guy, George Knapp. They have grown close over the years, and it's almost like George Knapp's kind of passing the torch to Jeremy. They kind of share information together. They actually started a podcast together called Weaponized. You've got these 3 guys, you've got Luis Elizondo, and then you've got George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell. All very important players. So and they all kind of know each other. So there's a few of the major players in the UFO world today, guys. I know it was a lot of information, but I hope some of those names stood out to you and you have some resources to go to for your own research. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.